My name is Jonah Jonathan, and welcome once again to the Jazz Musician's Voice. Today I have the great opportunity to present for you an interview I conducted with jazz guitarist David Gilmore. David Gilmore is one of the top-class guitarists in jazz and has played with the who's who of jazz, including Steve Coleman, Don Byron, Cassandra Wilson, Rudras Mahanthappa, Wayne Shorter, Christian McBride, and many others. In addition to touring and conducting master classes around the world, David teaches currently at Berklee School of Music. During our interview, some of the things we discussed included David's time when he first came to New York City, as well as what he thinks of New York now as compared to back then. And we talk about his experiences working with Steve Coleman and working with some of the other great artists that he's performed with. And in the end, we talk about his views on the music, and he plays some great guitar for us on another video that I've posted. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Please subscribe to this series. Check out my other videos. I've got some other great ones that are up there on my channel. Share these videos with your friends. Please comment and just give as much feedback and input as you can, and pass it on. And stay tuned for future interviews and music videos from the Litchfield Jazz Festival with cats including Benny Green, Hubert Laws, Miguel Zenon, Don Braden, and Eric Alexander, Gary Smullian. There's a talk with some great musicians, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. So continue watching and stay tuned. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today I have the great opportunity to interview jazz guitarist David Gilmore. Now, David, for people who aren't familiar with your background, could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the music? I understand you were born in Cambridge. You grew up in Cambridge, Mass.
Yep, I'm a native Cantabrigian, as they call it, and I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I grew up there. I moved to New York in '84, but basically I spent high school all the way through high school in Cambridge. Started playing guitar when I was about 15. Before that, I dabbled here and there on drums, on piano, stuff here and there, and then it was around when I was 15 I started getting serious about music and started taking guitar lessons, and studied with a great teacher named John Boboyan, who teaches at Berklee still, and I'm actually teaching at Berklee too, so I kind of see him, so it's kind of cool. I'm teaching alongside, and came to New York, as I said, in '84. I went to New York University and studied music and business there, and graduated in '87. It didn't take me 3 years, the math, 84, 87. I went before that, I went to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay, yeah. And when you came to New York, you studied with Joe Lovano, Jim McNeely, and Ralph Lama, among others.
Yeah, they were teaching at NYU, so I didn't really have, I took some lessons with Jim McNeely privately, but Joe Lovano was my ensemble director, and Ralph Lama subbed for him, and Mike Cochran, pianist, was there as well. So those guys were in and out, and John Schofield was teaching there, but I didn't get a chance to study with him. Yeah, it was good teachers there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great faculty to have. I also understand you studied privately with Randy Roos, a guitarist.
Randy Roos, yeah, that was in Boston before I came to New York. Yeah, and he's also actually at Berklee as well. So great teacher. He's really innovative. He plays fretless guitar, and he dabbled with guitar synth like way before anybody else. He's a real experimentalist. He also writes a lot of theme music for PBS station and a bunch of stuff like that. So
he kind of helped you get into the mode of going to NYU, right?
He kind of did, actually. He kind of, speaking of modes, actually, one of the things I remember about him was that this is like when I was discovering, major scale modes and all this stuff. I kind of knew about it from previous study, but he actually, made me play. He had a modal tape that he made, cassette tape, and he gave it to me, and it was just these vamps of the various modes, and I just thought it was a very creative way to actually teach that to students, whereas a lot of teachers are just like, here's Dorian, here's Phrygian, have fun with it or whatever. They don't even go beyond that.
Yeah,
so he made this really creative musical tape of overdubs of him playing and gave it to me, and that's when I was like, wow, man, I'm digging Lydian. I would just vamp and work on it, and he said just work on one string, work on two strings, things like that, and work in certain areas. So I thought that was really an eye-opener, actually, just in terms of, opening my ears up and not thinking, always playing changes, 2-5-1s and licks and stuff like that,
Yeah, I mean, that's, the modes are the modern,
Yeah.
the modern part of jazz, and
it's like the most ancient too.
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of music, it's like
the classical composers are very familiar. I mean,
Yeah.
Bach would tell you all about the modes. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
yeah.
And so then, how was it to attend NYU at that time? I mean, it's probably still one of the earlier times for music school. So
this was kind of way before. I mean, it's evolved a lot. The program. When I went there, it was kind of struggling, I have to say, because it was within this area of the school that was not really funded very well. We were like in the School of Education, nurse, health, and arts professions all wrapped into one. So we actually had a lot of student meetings about, protesting the lack of facilities and things like that. Piano room, practice rooms were terrible, the equipment was terrible. So it was in the infancy stage. Tom Boris, who passed away some years ago, he was the director of that. But we did have, as I said, Jim McNeely, who brought in, his, ridiculous arrangements, that he uses with the, Village Vanguard Orchestra and big band. And so we got that. So, despite the equipment, we got the education, but it's not like what it is now from what I hear. Dave Schroeder, actually, who's the head of music program now, he was attending school when I was there. Dave Douglas he was in a different program, but he was attending there. He was getting his master's there at the same time. So I met him back then in the 80s. Also Ben Allison was there.
Yeah, great bass player.
Yeah. So he's kind of a couple of people. Fema Efron, another great bassist. And some years later, I joined a group that he was in with Adam Rogers and Dave Binney and Ben Prosky called Lost Tribe.
Yeah.
Daniel Sedownik, I don't know if you know Daniel, he's a great percussionist, played with Tony, and millions of pop artists. So it was actually like a great student body. A lot of people went on to do great things.
So a training ground.
Yeah.
And how was the club scene when you arrived? I mean, jazz clubs.
Well, there was more of them.
Did you have particular spots you enjoyed frequenting?
I went to all of them. I mean, Fat Tuesdays, there was Seventh Avenue South, I think it was the Brecker Brothers Club.
Yeah.
that was some
club,
great stuff there. The Bottom Line was around. What was the other one? Bodiotes. There was this place uptown. Now I forget the name of it. There was a lot of places. There's just a whole host of choices.
Yeah, it must have been a great time.
Yeah, it really was. And from what everybody told me, actually, I missed the real great. I mean, there was a lot of great periods, of course. It was the whole loft scene. Back that Sam Rivers started and everything.
Yeah.
But I missed all that, of course, in the '70s. But I missed this period, I think, where it was sort of, maybe it was the tail end of that, but there was Grand Street, that Mike Stern used to play at before 55 Christopher Street, which I went to. That was one place I went to religiously when I first came to New York. Also because it was cheap, I could afford it. But it was like I missed this era. Everybody told me like all these places closed actually shortly before I moved to New York. So
Yeah, it's a transition period when you arrived, I guess.
yeah, I think it was.
It's the end of the tail end of the fusion era into the Young Lions movement, if
And
you
also
will.
yeah, and also what was happening. Yeah, the Young Lions thing was happening. Winton, who I discovered, like, I guess that was like end of, no, I probably was my early college, like 81 or something like that. But also the studio scene was drying up. Drum machines were coming in, and a lot of people were losing work at that point. So that really changed things a lot too.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you started when you finished school. You started working with Steve Coleman, right?
Yep.
Among some of the people you started working with.
As a matter of fact, I missed my graduation ceremony the day I went to Europe with Steve Coleman. It was my first European tour, my first tour with Steve Coleman. So to me, that was like my graduation.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah,
I prefer to go do that than to get this piece of paper. Which I got in the mail anyway. So it was all good. Yeah.
So working with Steve Coleman, Five Elements, and Embase Collective, among others, can you tell us a little bit what is Embase, and what were some of the things you learned from Steve during this period?
Well, Embase is an acronym that stands for Macro Basic Array of Structured Extemporizations, which basically is a fancy term for saying improvisation within structure, some musical structure, whatever that is. So, it was an acronym that we came up with to really give the music a name, as opposed to having critics and other people stamp some kind of name on it, like post-fusion or whatever they would have come up with, which wouldn't define it anyway. So I think it's like ACM or whatever group. I think it's in a business sense a good thing to label, to call it your own thing. And it's just a name. It's music. But what I really dug about the organization of musicians that were involved is we were all kind of like-minded in that we basically had more or less the same musical backgrounds, this African-American heritage, growing up with mostly actually R&B and funk, the music, James Brown and Parliament, Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and Fire, was the music that we were first introduced to, and then more or less jazz came later. For me, it didn't come until I started studying music around 15, 16, and my teacher introduced me to it. So we have that sensibility of the funk and rhythmic music. Jazz is a rhythmic music, I should say, but more of like a pocket grooves, more pop-oriented stuff, and having that inform our other things, jazz, so-called jazz, which I don't term as an idiom. It's not a style of music, but it's more a way of thinking, a philosophy or something, So.
And what did Steve teach you when you were studying that? I mean, and playing in that.
In that. Well, I started with Steve when I guess it was 86, 87. In Steve Coleman, Five Elements, and then other various bands. So through him and other guys, I think one of my earliest, the earliest things that I learned from him was how to develop and really play music with odd meters and polymetric stuff, and how to feel more free in that type of environment, and so he taught me, we would work all together with this kind of long beat, short beat concept, sort of thinking of it as a clave as opposed to, counting it in your head or something like that. And then practicing rhythms and various things over that, and then there was other harmonic aspects and stuff. And but mainly I would say the rhythmic aspect was the main thing that really opened my mind up to a whole nother level. Because I was into fusion, I was into, I listened to Mahavishnu and all this stuff, and they all had odd meters, but it was very much, there was such an emphasis on the one, you know, on the downbeat.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, and it was this kind of repetitive cycle, and it always felt a little bit constricted, you know. But right away, like with Steve's, you know, first or second record, this song called "Change the Guard," you know, which is in 7. He's got these rhythms that really just float over this, you know, the horn like you know. I was like, what is this? You know,
it's unique, you know.
And it's become like, it's informed my whole musical situation to this day. I mean, I really feel very natural and comfortable playing it on meters, and I feel, and I've developed a technique of teaching it now where it really makes sense. I mean, you have to, you know, rhythm, you have to feel it, you have to internalize it, and you have to do that through some kind of a physical body relationship, you know. And you know, it's something you can learn later on in life, you know, but it helps if it's earlier, if you listen to that kind of music. But there's nothing natural about 4/4 versus 7/4 versus 9 or anything like that. So it's just a matter of internalizing it in the body. So
sure, I mean, that's really something great to have worked on early in your career, because I know a lot of musicians struggle with playing in odd meters and polyrhythmic stuff. So
yeah, and they don't, you know, they don't teach it in school. You know, I mean, there's such an emphasis on harmony and melody and counterpoint theory, ear training,
swing.
and rhythm is just like glossed over for the most part. You know, there's no real methodology unless you're studying Carnatic Indian music. You know, they have a very detailed system for teaching rhythm. You know, and it's very effective, but you know, this is similar in a way, except we're not using these, you know, takadimi and these symbols. But yeah, it's incredible. So you know, as you know, a lot of seasoned professional musicians who run away from anything, you know, beyond
it's scary to them.
Yeah, it's scary to them. But you know, and I can understand it when you've been playing as a professional musician for many years, and then you know you're introduced to something that's really alien, and it's going to make you sound a little bit shaky. You don't want to approach it. But you know, my attitude and the attitude of a lot of people in Embase was like, you know, we want to push the envelope, we want to learn, you know, and challenge ourselves, and that's the way a lot of players like Train and Bird and those guys, you know, they weren't afraid to sound, you know, like shit for a while. You know, it was like, you know, they had to do this. Sonny Rollins,
working on their stuff.
They worked at it. They knew that they had to go through this period of struggle. So, you know, I went through a period of struggle when I joined Steve's band because I thought like I said, I thought I had it down, and it wasn't the case.
It's a learning experience.
Yeah.
And then in the very early '90s, like you mentioned before, you started working with the very popular group Lost Tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
very popular.
Which included
yes.
David Binney.
How popular?
You know,
no,
yeah.
we
Included David Binney, Ben Porowski, and Steve Coleman, among others.
Mm-hmm.
How did that group come about, and what was the creative vision behind it?
I think that happened. Well, I met Dave Binney through, if I'm not mistaken, through Marvin Smitty Smith, the drummer, who I knew through playing with Steve Coleman. And so Smitty put a band together with myself and Dave Binney. Edward Simon was in that band. He was like 19 years old. You know, he was
cool.
playing with Kevin Eubanks at that time, and he was just like, you know, incredible genius back then. You know, Paul Nowinski was the bass player actually. So I met Binney through that, and then I knew that Binney was involved with this group Lost Tribe, and you know Adam Rogers, who I had seen before. I think one time I saw him actually playing in a park somewhere, you know, like on the street. He was on the street doing a street performing thing. And I was like, what? You know, this badass guitar player. And then, you know, I didn't know who he was. I didn't see him for years. And then years later, Benny introduced me to him. I remembered who he was. So they were using various piano players. I know Rachel Z was playing in that band at one point. And then they just knew, at that time I was playing guitar synth a bit. So they had the idea to have me play, have two guitars basically, you know, and that's how that started.
That's a unique. It
was a unique thing, yeah. Not too many two guitar bands other than like rock bands or something like that. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And what was really the vision behind the group? I mean, what kind of stuff did you guys talk about when you were playing? I mean,
It was just eclectic. I mean, we didn't really come up with at least I wasn't privy to any of the conceptual stuff. I mean, they were together quite a bit before I joined, but we just brought tunes. We just brought tunes to the table, and if it was like a heavy metal kind of a tune, that was cool. If it was more smooth type of thing, that was cool. Funk, it was whatever goes. But it was instrumental music. There's some rap stuff in there, but we just brought it all in there. And Walter Becker from Steely Dan produced the first record for Windham Hill Jazz, and we went out to Maui to do it at Walter Becker's studio. It was unbelievable, man. And we just played, but consequently it was a hard band to market. That was the problem. I mean, Windham Hill really didn't know what to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of genres that you put together.
Yeah, we kind of struggled trying to get tours going and clubs, and we did some rough stuff. We opened up for Steve Morse one time. We drove from New York to Chicago, and then down to Nashville, and then Atlanta. It was some crazy traveling for very little money, but it was fun. I mean, it was really a lot of fun. It was a killer band. I had a really great time.
In 1995, you get the call to join one of the greatest composers and musicians in the history of jazz, Wayne Shorter.
Yeah.
And how was it working with Wayne? I mean, it must have been an amazing
experience. It was a great experience, man. It was just, the highlight, I think. High Life, I should say. Because the album that we did was High Life. You guys did, yeah. And that was a great experience. And, through a couple different bands. I mean, he's, not just a great musician and composer, of course, but a great human being, in my opinion. He was just a very warm, humorous, energetic, endlessly creative person, day to day. And I just found that actually just as inspiring as the music, because here's this guy who's been around for decades, and he's just got this energy and this, charisma and this curiosity about life, as if he just, on his first tour almost, he just acted like that, So I really dug it. I sort of felt like he was like a second father to me.
Sure.
He took me under his wing, and it was very, very kind.
Did you guys talk about anything musically, or was it more of just a Miles type of? Yeah,
you would just like throw little drops here and there of like. I mean, you would create little stories and stuff like that. I mean, one thing I always say, like people ask me, is what he said on anecdote, and I mean, that's one thing that always sticks out in my head is because sometimes on stage he would, in the middle of playing, he would just like stop and he would come up to me and he would say, have you ever tried to play as if you just picked up your instrument for the first time, and and then he would just run and then start blowing some stuff, And he said Miles kind of did that as well. They just had this sort of, they wanted to be as fresh as possible, and not bring this preconceived thing to the stage, which I really have tried to carry forth as well. I don't know how successful I've been, but I try to keep it conscious, because to me, the thing that really attracts me to jazz, to improvisational music, is the immediacy and the freshness of the moment. It's the most immediate thing you could do, musically and creatively, and there's no time for second guessing or anything. You just have to, whatever comes out with with no judgment. So I think that's where he's been getting at all these years, is really that kind of attitude.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne is just an incredible musician, and that's incredible that you were able to play with him and work with him, and like you said, the album High Life was a Grammy award-winning album, and after that, where did you go next after working with Wayne?
Well, I was working simultaneously a couple of different things. I mean, Don Byron was the person who I worked with a lot during this time period, like from the mid-90s, and Lost Tribe, and then this percussionist Trila Gertu I worked with a lot, did a couple of albums with him. So this was all like going on. I was on the road a lot. I was traveling, doing a lot of road work. And then at one point I had to let something go, and the Lost Tribe thing was kind of the next thing, I think, to let go, because I was getting busy with Treelock, and there was there was a big tour coming up where they were going to drive like cross country, all circumnavigate the whole country up into Canada and back. And I was just like, guys, I got this other thing going. I really wanted to do it, but it was just time to drop something, you know. And they went on and did another record after that. You know, Wayne, various people, I think Randy Brecker I was playing with and stuff, and you know, and trying to get my own thing together. I always did a few gigs here and there, you know, and I was kind of itching to do my own, you know, solo thing. I just really didn't know what I wanted to do at that time, you know, and I had some offers to do some things, and it just, you know, I didn't, they weren't the right projects, you know, so I was just doing a little of everything, playing with my brother as well, you know.
Mark Gilmore.
Yeah.
And then you started becoming leader, and you came out with your first album, Ritualism, and that was early 2000.
2001. Yeah, I decided to do I did it myself. I put it out on my own label. I approached some people. I got some interest, but at that point I was just like it was already in motion, and I just decided, let me try this. I knew some other people. Matt Garrison, I think, had just done his CD, independent release, and I saw how a lot of artists were starting to do this with some success. And I actually, at this point, things really took off in terms of distribution. I got some stuff in France. It sold really well. In Japan, I got distribution. It was pretty amazing now that I think about it, because now I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to do this again. But actually, things are even easier now distribution-wise, because it's not so important to get it in stores anymore.
Yeah, it can be on the web.
Yeah, but this thing I got in stores, and at this point, Tower Records was still around, and you could sell it there on consignment, you know, and things like that. So it got good, you know, I got really good write-ups and stuff like that, and yeah, it was a great time. And it was, I used to play at this club called Dharma, which is not around anymore, on the Lower East Side. And my band mainly consisted of Rodney Holmes on drums, George Colligan piano, James Genius played, and then Brad Jones took over. As James started playing on Saturday Night Live, and that's it. And you know, I never got the tour thing going too much. You know, did some local stuff and everything. I was trying to get a booking agent, but that never really took off. And then, you know, other things came up.
So, and at this time, did you have other projects as a leader? I mean, you're now a leader for many.
Yeah, I was doing that band, and then I had some other thing. I had this thing called Organismic, which I never recorded, but it was an organ, guitar thing. You know, and Hurricane did some of those gigs. Adam Klippel also, and what else did I do? There was a couple of other things which I still want to get together. Just more on the kind of funk type of tip, you know, less instrumental, less jazzy kind of stuff, you know.
And you know, during that time, you also started working with Christian McBride, right?
Oh yeah, I guess like around that time. I met Christian actually. When did I meet Christian? I think when I started playing with Wayne. In 97, 98 or something like that, I think. Maybe it was before that. Can't remember if I did Christian's album before or after. But anyway, we started working together. We were supposed to record with Wayne on his next album, on Wayne's next album, like 98 or so. We actually went out to LA to rehearse. We rehearsed a couple of days. It was Brian Blade, myself, Christian, and Jim Beard. And then Wayne got called to go to the White House. Clinton was president at the time, and he was invited there for some function. And he went off to the White House, and we're, you know, in LA, and, you know, okay, what do we do now? So, and then, so the recording didn't happen, and then, you know, the next thing we know, like a couple of years later, he put out Patitucci and Danilo, the band that he's with now. And then, so I did a couple of recordings with Christian and some touring and stuff. And then I started working, I guess, on in early 2003 or so, like on my next record,
Unified
Presence, which was mainly a trio record with saxophone as well on a few tunes.
Yeah, you worked with Ravi Coltrane and
Ravi,
Chris McBride and Tame Watts.
Yeah.
And on both of these records, you experiment with many different rhythms and odd time signatures and polyrhythms.
What I was doing with Embase and this kind of stuff, where I don't know, I don't really think. Most of the time when I compose, it comes from some kind of spontaneous idea or improvisation or something like that. So I'm not, thinking ahead, oh, I'm going to write something in 7 or whatever. If it turns out that way, that's what it is, and I figure it out later. But sometimes I use compositional stuff. Like I'll fit like a bar. Something is in a bar playing a 4-beat cycle. Something plays a 5-beat cycle, and I know that they meet, every 20 beats or something like that. 4 bars of 5 or 5 bars of 4. I have some things where those things work out, but that's, most of the time it's kind of a spontaneous composition thing.
Well, it's both of them are really great albums,
and
I really enjoy listening to
thanks,
the. I think it's something different than what's been done before. I think. I mean, if you look at the progression and the evolution of jazz, some people say, okay, jazz stopped with fusion, but you and some other artists kind of are pushing it forward. I mean, that's what some of these younger guys, the Young Lion guys like Wynton and some of these other people who kind of speak to the critics and kind of say, okay, fusion was it, and now we're going to go back to the roots. But people like you are pushing the music forward and going in it.
It's so weird I find it very strange to speak in those terms. I understand when people say pushing jazz forward. To me, again, it's like, what is jazz? When they say it in those terms, they're expressing it as a type of genre or style of jazz, and to me that's just so limiting. And I understand, I guess, the reasons for categorizing things, from a marketing standpoint, I guess, or whatever. But it's just music. And so, there are people who are very much attached to what's been done before and are interested in keeping that going, that style of music or that attitude going, and more power to them. I think that's great, and it's a place for it, and it's valid. But to then get into this whole debate about what is true jazz, where's jazz going, is jazz dead? You know what I mean? To me, that just doesn't make sense. This where do you draw the line of what is so-called jazz, what is not jazz, who's playing it, who isn't playing it, when did it end? It's senseless. It's a waste of time. That's what it is.
I agree
it's
with
really
you.
a waste of time. But I'm happy to, people want to label it jazz. I don't care. It's like if they enjoy the music, that's great. Even if they don't enjoy the music, as hard as that is for me as an artist to accept, because we all want our music to be loved and accepted and everything like that. It makes life easier. But ultimately, I'm not going to, we're not going to be happy if we're not happy with what we're producing. I care more about what I'm producing and hearing from myself as opposed to how much money I'm getting for it. So.
Sure, like the Duke said, there's only good and bad music.
Good and bad music, right?
That's
yeah.
And I guess could you tell us a little bit about your current musical collaborations? Because I know you work with a lot of groups right now, and you're pretty busy.
Well, what am I doing these days? I just did a gig yesterday with Ravi Coltrane, and he calls me every now and then to do a hit here and there. Rujesh Mahathapa I've been doing stuff with. We did a record. This came out last September. A project called Samdi, which is really a lot of fun. Rich Brown, this bass player from Toronto, amazing 6-string bassist. And the drum chair switches now. Rudy Royston's doing it, and Gene Lake, actually, who I worked with Steve Coleman for many years. So that's a lot of fun. I play with Javon Jackson every now and then, and Les McCann. So that's a whole other thing, It's like a throwback to the past, but it's fun. And I'm teaching at Berkeley, 2 days a week. And I'm finishing up a couple of recordings that I did as live at the Jazz Standard with this big group that did this grant with Chamber Music America. And this is one instance where I actually applied more theoretical stuff than I'm used to applying, because I based it on numerology, and so I kind of brought some compositional things together for that. But so that's going to come out probably in a couple of months, actually. And then I did this quintet thing about a year ago with Antonio Sanchez, Marcus Strickland, Luis Perdomo, and Ben Williams. And hope to have that out hopefully by the end of the summer.
Now let's move on to. You've worked with so many musicians as a sideman. You've worked on well over 50 recordings, and your sound and tone has been classified in a wide range. Some have said it's edgy and distorted. Others say it's very clear tone. And could you tell us about developing your tone, and who were your primary influences on guitar as far as your sound? Because you have a very unique sound, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons you're working so much as a sideman.
Well, my early influences on guitar as guitar players would be George Benson, Wes Montgomery, all the unnamed funk guitar players and names, Catfish Collins, Bootsy's brother who passed away not that long ago, and Mike Hampton from P-Funk, and Leo Nocentelli, and these guys. Definitely, before the jazz folks, these were guys who I unconsciously listened to, and I would say that maybe, I don't know how, I think I've been hired in such a variety of things because I'm very eclectic in my taste and style, I can play rhythm guitar pretty well, and cop some jazz stuff or whatever, so stylistically I can kind of be a chameleon of sorts, but as far as my own sound, I think if I were to define it at all, I think it would be not so much tone and all this stuff, but although everybody does just by nature, when they hit the strings, they have their own sound, it just does come through.
Sure,
but
yeah.
There's the what you play, how you play it and stuff, and how long you hold the notes and all that stuff. I think, I'm a closet drummer. I started on drums and percussion, and I just sort of feel like my, information comes from that, from a rhythmic standpoint more than a melodic standpoint, actually. And that drives kind of my concept more than anything.
Well, now I wanted to ask you about your time as an educator, because you've taught at Berkeley, and like you're mentioning, and you've taught a lot of master classes and such. What do you think about jazz as being taught in schools nowadays, as opposed to how you learned at NYU?
Well, just I think it's really come a long way. I really don't have the perspective of I guess the perspective I have of learning jazz in academic setting is from when I studied to now where I'm teaching. So I think, I don't know how much it's changed. I think there's probably there's a much broader range of subjects that are taught, and people teaching, turntable techniques now, and sound design, through, logic, focusing on actual software. Whereas, when I was in college, that stuff wasn't even, hardly anybody owned a personal computer at that point. I didn't get one until when, like 1989 or 90, and I got an Atari, used Atari, 1040 ST, 2 megabytes. Thing cost me used like about $1,000. Ridiculous, and then the 30 megabyte hard drive was as big as the CPU. It was like this big. So now they're teaching this stuff, because it all relates to music, all the technical aspects. So I guess, I don't know, I don't teach theory classes or anything like that. Sometimes I do, but most of my teaching at Berkeley is with guitar students, and then I have an ensemble there. And then the master classes I've done are mainly focused on my musical approach and rhythm, things like that. So, but I think your training is probably more or less still the same. I don't know what has developed. I just think there's probably a lot more choices today than before. And I don't know. I'm curious to know if rhythm is something that has been added to the roster of. Maybe you could tell me more because
Well, I think attending William Patterson, the rhythm that we learned was the classical side of things, kind of just understanding rhythm and from a classical sense. I don't think we really worked on time signatures still. So I think that's still something that if you're going to learn it, you have to learn it on the bandstand. And I think you're very fortunate to have worked with Steve Coleman on that because it's still a very scary concept for some of us musicians. It's something to work on.
Berkeley has some ensembles like that. There's actually a Steve Coleman ensemble that someone teaches in odd meter ensemble, and I've had some students tell me that they've been a part of it, but they've also reported to me that they're not really still being taught how to play seven or how to negotiate through this. They're just sort of throwing the stuff and stuff. So. There is a methodology to it.
Yeah, I guess you were really able to benefit from the teacher mentorship type approach, which is not necessarily the case in music school still.
Right.
I mean,
right. Unless you're lucky to land a gig outside,
Well, you are such an innovative musician and composer, and very creative. Do you have advice for young musicians who are trying to do their own thing and go in their own direction?
I guess just be really honest with yourself, first of all, about why you are doing what you're doing. Why are you in the music business, and why what is it that attracted you to music, as far as finding, I think you just really have to let things develop. You have to be patient about it. If you're trying to seek a sound, a personality, a style, or something, I think it's more difficult than if you just sort of you really just not judge yourself. This is the hardest thing, I think, or at least for myself. I think the judgment thing, because it's very competitive if you allow it to be. Because New York, there's no shortage of killing musicians. And it's easy to get a complex, and how come he's got this gig and gets this record deal and stuff. So you'll find yourself being tempted to alter your playing, your composing, all kinds of things in order to get to where you think that person is, and often that person isn't even where you think that person is. We often think these guys got record deals and they're making tons of money and all this stuff and successful, and they're struggling just as much as you are. So I think you just really got to be honest about what it is you want, not just musically but just in life, and who you are as a person, and what steps are going to make you feel more satisfied and more complete, because I know the competition thing, some people get energized by that. I get worn out by it. I find it to be an exhausting motivational force. When you're younger, okay, that's cool, but I'm 48 now, so it's not something that I like to tie myself into. Do I get it from now and then? Sure. Would I like to do more, tour more under my own name? Sure. More records, this, that, and the other. And I could always point to people who have gotten stuff seemingly like that ahead of me, or I can point to the opposite of people who don't. So it's like, there's this spectrum, and at the end of the day, you are where you are, and to not judge yourself, to not be harsh on yourself, and to really know who you are as a person is the most important thing. Then just the music and the sounds will come, and expose yourself to as much as possible. I mean, that was what I think I benefited from, is not being in a vacuum, of course, of a school environment only. I was fortunate to hook up with some very highly creative musicians at a relatively early age in my musical development, and it just catapulted me, I think, in a direction. But I was open-minded to that before I got into that. If I wasn't open to that, then something different would have happened. So I think it just was a natural progression. And you just have to be open to whatever, and explore. Rambling here, but you just have to be open-minded.
No, it's great. And as a musician yourself, where would you like to go with regards to your music, and what direction would you like to explore in jazz? Or music per se?
Well, I mean, just in the immediate future, I see, like I mentioned, about a week ago, I just saw George Clinton getting an honorary degree at Berkeley, and he performed with the P-Funk ensemble there, like every other tune. So I was hanging backstage with him on the side of the stage, and that just really stoked my, my funk desires, to really put together a project along those lines, So I really just want to pull out my Strat and do something along those lines, but with some, some edgy. I mean, that stuff's edgy as it is, but something along those lines. I'd like to do something like that. I've always had these more electric projects, so I kind of feel like I want to do more of that, less of acoustic projects. I don't know, man. Wherever the wind blows, man. I'm trying not to be telegraphed too much in the future, and when I make these plans and intentions, they never quite pan out the way I want them to. So I keep my intentions very loose, and then I just sort of see what happens, and I keep myself open. So, and I love being a sideman. I love playing, with different people and being in different musical situations that challenge me, and I'm just trying to get better as a player. Playing standards and stuff. I'm always working on, well, not enough as I'd like to, but I'm always trying to do that stuff. I don't have a desire to put out a standards album or anything like that. There's people I feel would do that way better than I ever could. But to just see what that can bring to my musicality.
Well, David, thanks for doing this interview. Can you tell us where people can check you out? What website and music and CDs?
DavidGilmore.net. Gilmore, not to be confused with the
Pink
other
Floyd
Pink
Guitarist.
Floyd guy, Gilmour. So DavidGilmore.net. I'm not playing anywhere in the city anytime soon, so I can't give you any gig dates. I'm going to be on the road in April with Rujesh and some other things. But that's where you can find out all gig information and CDs and releases and stuff like that. So,
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
All right, Jonah, thank you.